Good morning.
Buenos días.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone. Well, welcome today. We have a very important session with the participation of a representative from Asia and Africa. We have a list. Perhaps, I think because we are, I think eight projects, eight different projects. Perhaps we can do, we can present, for example, in the first part of the session, three projects. And after we can open the floor to questions, comments, etc. And in the second part of the session, we can hear the next projects. Okay, and I will be delighted to ask Mayora Lorena to open this incredible space today with your experience, and I hope all the participants will enjoy this experience. No, I think it's important to know it's not a test, is a sharing between the friends and sisters, and I hope you will be happy and enjoy the experience. Okay. Mi querida Mayora Lorena, buenos días, qué gusto verla.
Good morning, Ms. Lorena. It's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to see everyone here again. Good afternoon, good evening to each one of you. Good morning to this session. Welcome to this new session for today. It's a special day. And I even prepared these flowers for you so that they can all be filled with joy, so that each of your words and your feelings and thinking grow when you're presenting your proposal. I think I want you to invite yourself to feel as a family, to be heard, to be listened, and that whatever comment can be used to build and strengthen. So just like these flowers, some are very young, just buttons, some already have bloomed. I have from different colors, so that this can be the words that you're going to speak today can grow and bloom in your case studies today. I want to ask the energy for this day so that you are guided from your thinking and feeling. When we talk about this feeling, thinking, and cosmo feeling, we grow, we bloom. One grandmother tells us, when you speak with your heart, and you're going to move other your hearts. So today I want to invite you to express yourself like this when you're explaining your case study, because it's not like Angela mentioned, it's not a test. No, it's a process of wanting to build all these practices of love, of depression, of controlling who's better, who's not, who has more proposals. No, that's not the idea. What we're doing is present a proposal of quality with a lot of tenderness, with wisdom, and there is not a better or worse. Each one of you has your own dimension. So I'm going to ask the heart of the sky, the heart of the earth, and the heart of the dawn and of dusk, and the heart of the water and the heart of time, so that each one of you blooms in the words that we're going to be speaking, and the thinking and feeling of each one of your sisters from Africa and Asia. Each time that you're going to be sharing this feeling, these proposals of your research, and when I ask the energy of the grandmothers and grandfathers, so that whatever is written takes the heart, it has meat, it's grown, and it grows and becomes a reality. so that when it comes June and you're presenting this results, we see this access, this success, and this path that you walked. So good morning, and hopefully we have that project today, getting together with this communities, getting together with the sisters. I invite at the heart of the skies and the earth, of the wind and the water, to be guiding your steps, to guide in your path. And when it's time for you to go to these communities and territories, you go with joy and happiness. And when you're there, you open the path and you open the doors and the heart of the people with whom you come in contact with. All these people you're going to be talking to and your feelings, bro. And then you can put this, gather this, collect this information. Thank you all. And we ask Stacy and Vivian and Ukila uh, and Eileen. And who else is here today? I mean, and every one of the other peers from representing your cases from Africa and Asia. And I also ask for the Abjayala who already presented so they can continue weaving. And if we need to unweave something and then rebuild it again, let's do that. May you all be happy. May you all be filled with joy. These flowers are for you. And may you bloom with these colors and with this energy. The proposal that you're presenting today, a big hug. Let's embrace ourselves. A hug. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. And let's put our hands in our hearts to say, I feel that I'm happy, that I'm enjoyed, that I'm blooming. And we put it in our heads, in our feelings, and I feel that I'm safe, that I'm at peace, that I'm wise. And I feel that grandmothers and grandparents are coming in my way, in my words, and I'm feeling their advice. I put my hands in my belly button and say, I feel the balance in me. I feel the harmony in me. I feel in me life. I'm going to flow with love and in love and tenderness. And I brace myself with the energy of the sun, with the energy of the water, and the energy of the wind, and the energy of everything. Let's kiss our hands as well. Because with our hands, we have typed. We have made a bit of that water as well to calm the thirst. Our hands are a gift for our territories. I embrace myself and I start this session. So they're going to present this new flick. I know that you guys are guided with your heart, with your feelings and thinking. Let's begin today. Angela already said what we need to be doing. So I left the word for the presentation of each one of you. And at the time, I'm going to be listening with the heart, with the ears of our souls, and see you with the heart to the heart. Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Muchas gracias, Mayor. Qué bello.
Thank you. Thank you. That's beautiful. I was going to ask you, is it fine for you if we do 2 or 3 presentations, or do you want to go one by one? Since you're a main commentator, how would you like to work? I want to listen to you. What do you think? Do you go give reaction to each presentation, or do you want to go? Okay, so we'll be listening to 3 presentations. I'll take notes. All righty.
Well, we have the first section is the presentation of Daisy, Doman, and Vivian. Welcome to this incredible experience and good luck. Enjoy. Please, Daisy, go on.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. I hope you can hear me. So, thank you. I'm going to share my presentation. I'm sorry, I'm using a phone speaker because my laptop speaker isn't that well. So I will share my presentation in the other app. Can you see it, please? Okay. Thank
Sí, sí
you.
se logra ver.
Yes, it can be seen.
Thank you. So I am Daisy Chepkopus from Africa, Kenya. I'm a Pokot Indigenous girl, and as you can see, that is me in my traditional attire. That is how we dress. That's the skirt that we always put on, the beads and all that. So my research title is going to be on challenges faced by Indigenous girls in the practice of the right to education among the Pokot Indigenous community of Kenya, Africa. And where I'm going to major, I'm not going to do research in the whole of Pokot because Pokot is so big. So I'm going to do it in a ward known as Chesra, and I'm going to major in 3 villages, which is Naramam village, Chepukat village, and Chesra village. And I think I'm going to be fast because of time. I'm sorry. So on my justification is the study of challenges faced by Pokot girls in education matters is essential for several reasons. I felt it's very important because there is a lot of reasons. As a girl, as I grew up in the community, there are some things I saw, and some of these reasons like contribute to the broader goals of promoting gender equality, social justice, and sustainable development. So you'll find out that in my community, there are some deeply rooted cultural activities that influence gender roles, family dynamics, and social expectations. And these norms normally they prioritize boys' education over the girls' education. And this study, I felt it's going to help the girls and women in my community to amplify their voices and full potential, which will lead to them building a more inclusive and resilient community. And I just cited an example in one of the girls' schools, which is in one of the villages, that one day I was doing a certain training and I saw the population, and I can tell you it was like 7-3 ratio. And that's why I felt like this study is very essential. Uh-huh. So my principal objective, which is like my specific objective, is to study challenges faced by Pokot girls in education matters, to provide a comprehensive understanding of the barriers and obstacles hindering girls' access to and retention in education with the Pokot community. So I felt to concentrate majorly on these barriers, on the challenges. I didn't want to do a general study. I wanted to do the barriers and challenges to get to know what are really these barriers that are like detaining our girls back from education, more so in the 3 villages that I told you. And I had 5 specific objectives. And one is to tackle sociocultural barriers and economic challenges to improve girls' access to education in the Pokot community. As I told you, we have some really deeply rooted cultural activities, and I would really love to get to them, understand, and know more of these. My second specific objective is to study economic barriers to girls' education, which is like poverty, household finances, schooling costs. I come from a very interior part in my country, and we are mostly termed as inferior, and people living in the marginalized area, and we are mostly affected by poverty and all that. I felt it's one of the things affecting them. That's why I felt I have to do a study and have to go and get a clear thing about it. My third specific objective is to examine impact of gender-based violence on Pokot girls' education. I have a friend who did a study on almost the same thing, and I felt it also affects education. That's why I really wanted to do it too. My fourth one is to assess health obstacles impact on Pokot girls' education. We have very few hospitals, more so in the areas that I cited. I'm going to do my research. And I felt, and I would like to know more about health, if it's affecting the education, which I feel it does. And the last specific objective was to evaluate Pokot girls' education system for improvement. On the methodology, I decided to use intercultural methodologies. And the first thing I'm going to do is I will start by engaging the community leaders and elders respectfully to understand the cultural context, norms, and values influencing education within the community. one thing is that there have been several researchers in my community, and most of them ended up not well. Some were even beaten. Some did their research till half and they couldn't finish. And I felt it's very important to first approach the community leaders and the elders, because they are the ones who give us the guidance and all that in our community. And how I'm going to do this is, as I showed you in my first page, is I'm going to dress traditionally because I feel I'm going to fit into the culture. They're going to know I'm their own daughter. I'm going to speak to them in my dialect, local dialect, because I can speak it so well. And that's one methodology I felt like this is what I'm going to imply first. The second is I'll incorporate participatory research method, which will help empower Pokot girls and community members to actively participate in the research process. I'm not just going to do something like secretively. I'm going to have my people like in the research. People are going to participate. I'm going to use like songs. There are ways in which girls in my community we interact. There's a way in which I'm going to interact with the boys. I'm not just going to do like a secluded one. Third is I will employ culturally relevant data collection techniques, which will ensure the data collection techniques are culturally appropriate and sensitive to the local context. One of these is I'm going to use songs and storytelling, because my people really love to sing, they really love to dance, they really love to make stories and all that. Just like in the picture you're seeing there, that is a picture whereby in the context is the men in my community, when they are like giving us a story of what happened, they will sit on those chairs. As you can see, not anyone can sit on them. And when they sit on them, we feel like what they tell us, everyone has to know and everyone has to get, and it's always like traditional knowledge. Next is I will embrace reflexivity and positionality by critically reflecting on my own personality and biases as a researcher and recognize the power dynamics inherent in cross-cultural research. I will then facilitate cross-cultural dialogue and exchange, which will encourage dialogue and exchange between me and the community members and foster mutual understanding and respect. I came up with a term that I would like to name it, and I wanted to name it Lakoti as I've written. That means this. I hope everyone can see it. In my community, when a mother or a woman puts on this, I had showed you last time, it shows much respect and all that. And if you want to approach anything in my community, if you mention this, then you finished it all. So I felt like I can rename my methodology this, so that when I put it on and other women are putting it on, even the men will listen to me. I will also try and employ interviews and questionnaires, because we have few institutions, as I had told you. I can offer some questionnaires and interviews to the teachers there, so that I know they can have some information as to why girls drop out or as to why girls don't come to school. And finally is I will translate my findings into culturally appropriate action that will ensure that research findings are translated into culturally appropriate action and interventions that resonate with the needs and aspirations of my people. And on the timeline, I know here I'll need some correction if it will be too much, because of how I considered how events happen in my community. We have seasons of everything. I cannot just access like elders anytime I feel like there is a season I can access them. And this is my timeline. My phase 1, I was to do the preparatory work, which is project initiation. Then week 3 to 4, the literature review. Then my phase 2, which is going to take another 1 month, which will be the research design and proposal development, which I think that I've covered, we've done with the class. Then a duration of 3 months, the data collection. The primary data collection, I'll do it. Then later on, I'll analyze, I'll try and do the data analysis and also interpret and report it back to you. And finally, I will do a final writing report, which I will later on disseminate it to you, or if allowed, to the people in my community. And to the references, I went through 2 books that were relevant to my community, but no one has ever done a research in the places I mentioned, but they were it's one community and they face the same challenges. And there's one author that I really loved his work, is called NC Andiema, which he wrote a book on influence of culture on girl child education, and he did it in some other part of Pokot. And there's also another one who did on quality challenges of free primary education. Despite the fact that we have free, there are challenges, but now this is why I came in to get to know these challenges in hand. And I have a friend who did, I didn't put it here because she hasn't published. She did a research on education in Pokot. She's called Cheruto, but I didn't get to access a book. It's not in the internet, but we once shared. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Daisy, and congratulations for this amazing presentation. Now
Thank
we
you.
have the second presentation. I
Ahora tenemos la siguiente.
think is the Nukila.
Thank you, my professor, my teacher, Angela and Lorena. Buenos dias, buenas tardes, and buenas noches, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening for all of my friends. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to share my presentation, my research proposal. Okay. I hope I can share it. Okay. So this, oh, sorry. What? This is my how do you call it? My custom. I use baju kurung. In this in front of my grandfather house, and this is my organizations in Indonesia. With the logo Indigenous Peoples Initiatives, or in bahasa Indonesia is Inisiasi Masyarakat Adat. My research proposal title is Breaking the Marginalization of Land Ownership of Indigenous Sea Women in the Riau Islands amidst a culture of violence and patriarchy. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm from Riau Islands, Indonesia. It is in Sumatra Islands. So my presentation will be the justification and the significance of the research, and then the research questions, the 3 objective and specific objective, and then 4 methodology, 5 conceptual framework, 6 planifications, 7 research phases, and 8 timetable, and 9 budget. So I would like to show you before the core of my presentation, because I'm going to talk about the sea people. This is in Sumatra Island, as you can see on the left side. We have these sea people. Formerly, it called the Sampan tribe, or the nomad people, because they're nomad from one island to another island. This is an indigenous people in the Riau Island, Indonesia. They live in 2 places, 2 avenues. One in the coastal areas or in the land, and one in the sea, on the sea. They adhere to the animist religion. So they're not Protestant, they're not Islam, they're not Catholic. So they have their own religions, and they live by various rituals and tradition passed down from one generation to the other generation from their ancestors. Their house on land are like simple wooden steel houses. Meanwhile, their houses in the boat, because they're living in 2 places, right? With a canopy roof. Kajang, we call it kajang, is a type of roof made of palm leaf or coconut, which is used by the sea people tribe for shelter or for their sheep. According to the data from the Riau Islands Cultural Service, the sea people began to inhabit of Malay Lingga region in the past colonialization in the past many years ago, and then since 2500 until 1500 BC as the Proto-Malay or Malay people. This is the history of them. And they spread to most of the Sumatra via the Malacca Peninsula. You see this Malacca Peninsula near Malaysia, yeah? This Malaysia, as you can see on the left. The task of the sea people at that time was to guard the strait. This is the strait between Indonesia and Malaysia. The strait of Indonesian water, repel pirates, and guide traders to the port of the Malay kingdoms. So they are people who are loyal to the kingdom. When the sea people clans united, they were referred to as the Kerahan people. This is the term of the indigenous, the sea people. Currently, the sea people face the challenge of the greedy businesses on the sea, on the land, on the coastal areas, extractive industries, eco-city projects, climate change, and many more. So what about the women, indigenous women of the indigenous sea women? They face double discrimination in this regards. So the significance of this research, because the men have full rights to property ownership, not only amongst the indigenous people, but also for the majority of the Indonesian people. So men have full rights of the property of ownership on the land. Women have no rights in property land at the sea. You can see here the Rohana, the lady, the elder people, woman here. Rohana, she faced her world without nothing because she doesn't have anymore her husband, and she doesn't have the house, she doesn't have the land, because it's always depend on the husband if they want to stay in one house. I have another term about indigenous fisherwomen are the most marginalized one as well. It is indigenous fisherwomen. They also with the fishermen. They go to the sea to catch for the fish. The current situation, the situation as well, the woman not included in the decision-making process, in the planning of building the houses, for instance, or how many children they have in the family. They don't have the voice to do that. And women do not own anything, then manifested an experience of the stigma, discriminations, and sexual violence. In this sea people, you can see there are so many earlier child marriage. If you they have to, if the girl already 15 years old is already considered mature as an adult. So and then also it also impacted the sexual and reproductive health rights, because these sea people, they don't know how to access for contraception, for the birth control. And also the other issue, sorry, what's wrong with this? Okay. They're also, these women, mostly they're the breadwinners. They have the burden not only if they go not only in the house, because they have to taking care of the husband and the children, but also when they go to the sea, they have to go to the sea and then cooking, washing, and something like that. Next is the significance of the research. The research will examine the stigma, discrimination, and violence the indigenous women experience and their needs in the current situation. As you have, I have explained previously, there are so many, this long way, long standing challenge facing by the sea indigenous sea women, sorry. And this research will be provide information for intervention program regarding land ownership and cultural violence to stakeholders like the duty bearers, like the governments, women's organization, non-governmental organization, and indigenous peoples organizations. And then also protection of the indigenous women rights, including land rights interlinked with the education, and then health issues, work, and freedom from violence. The research questions that I would like to highlight. One is how to address the marginalization of the indigenous Sea women. And then what are the challenges, socio-cultural environment, cultural violence faced by the indigenous Sea women? And then third, what are the specific needs and priorities of indigenous Sea women? And how the policies and customary / indigenous practice responds to these issues. These are the research questions. And the objectives, general objectives, is to address the marginalization of the indigenous Sea women in the Rio Islands. And then what's wrong with this? And then the specific objectives, one, to analyze the socio-cultural, economic, and environmental factor contributing to the marginalization of the indigenous Sea women in Rio Islands. And second, to assess the prevalence and forms of the violence experienced by indigenous, including but not limited to gender-based violence or GBV, discrimination and restriction or social exclusion, for instance. And to identify specific needs and prioritize needs by indigenous Sea women regarding the land ownership, access to resources, and how that to tackle the violence. And fourth, to examine the legal framework, and customary practice, indigenous practice, governing land ownership and inheritance rights among indigenous peoples in the regions. And five, to develop targeted intervention and policy recommendation aimed at promoting the rights, empowerment, and well-being of indigenous Sea women in the Rio Islands. And the methodology that I'll use is, thank you for Angela for, I will do a mixed method approach because it's very interlinkage issues. So I will combining qualitative and quantitative research methods to obtain a comprehensive understanding of the issues faced by the indigenous Sea women. This is the methodology. And the methodology qualitative is like an in-depth interview, focus group discussion, FGDs, participant observation. And then quantitative, we need a survey and statistical analysis. For instance, how many currently the numbers of the indigenous Sea women. I think we need the numbers, right? And how many girls, adult women, or something like that. And then three participatory research approach that involve indigenous communities, local stakeholders, and women organizations in the research process. So I will also will we'll consult as well with some research institution, yeah, particularly to the women organizations. And then intercultural tools approach that I will use is intercultural dialogue and participatory workshop. And second one, community-based participatory research, for instance, to document indigenous Sea women cultural heritage, their traditional practice, their social environmental relation with their sea, with their coastal areas, and then identify and visualize significant cultural sites, customary territories and resource use areas, and storytelling sessions. And three, visual and art-based methods, like a participatory photography is very important because it's very interesting, right? Because they live in two avenues. And then B, community mapping to map. And then C, traditional art form will be utilized to engage with indigenous Sea women in creative expression and self-representation. The cultural protocol ethic that I need to follow. The research will adhere, of course, to cultural protocol and ethical guideline established in collaboration with indigenous people and cultural leaders. I need to follow with research are conducted in cultural appropriate and respectful manner. And research three, research respect for indigenous protocols, tradition, custom will be prioritized through research process. And then for indigenous protocol for knowledge sharing and reciprocity and confidentiality will be honored. And informed consent will be obtained from all participants prior to the data collection. And then the budget. The budget will be used for the logistic, like meals and accommodation, and then travel costs. 50% will be travel costs to Ria Island, because as you can see, it's not easy to go to one island to the another island where they move from one place to another place. And then 25% for the activities like like a FGD, dialogue, performing art or something like that. So this is the purpose for the budget. And then planification, preparatory phase, I will do that in April 2024. And then data collection on May until June 2024. And data analysis will be on June 2024. And intervention development will be on June or in early July 2024. So this is the research project timeline. So in the April, as you can see, the date and also the month and the year. Like preparatory phase, for instance, presentation for the research proposal starting this 1 April, and then refinement of the research proposal, and then literature readings, and then also listing required material, and then survey the location, contacting representative of indigenous peoples, and make administrative issues is very important on the preparatory phase in April. And then in May, I put also the date, so I'll need to stick on the date. So it will be the data collection. The data collection like an interview, dialogue, observation, and then culture, and then art approach. This is on May. I put on from 1 May until 30 May 2024. And then in June, I'll do data analysis beginning on June, like analyze data, prepare the reports, also the working papers. And then in July, I'm sorry, it's July or June, okay. And also intervention development, like maybe the process of evaluation and a feedback session will be on beginning, the latest is beginning of July 2024. So the targeted indigenous peoples, I will focus on the, of course, I will focus on for the indigenous women. For instance, the elder women, I make a categorization on that. And then I will also go for the disabled women in the indigenous people. Also indigenous fisher women, because not all the women there, they sometimes they become the housewife. But I will do the dialogue with the indigenous fisher woman, and then the young women, as well as the indigenous leaders. This is my targeted people, indigenous peoples, for this research. And then I will also, this is the concept of framework. I will focus on marginalization, even though there is no agreed definition of marginalization. But UNESCO and EVA Global Monitoring Report 2010 define marginalization as the form of acute, persistent disadvantage rooted in underlying social inequalities. So I will refer for UN governance, and also, for instance, regarding these issues. And then I will also focus on the sea people. As you can, if you read the World Ocean Day 2023, they already have the definition regarding the sea people. For indigenous people, the ocean, marine, and coastal environment is a sacred element that hold profound cultural significance. The sea is indigenous land too. This is from the World Oceans Day 2023. And then indigenous women are referred to the OAS, Organization of American States. Indigenous women are the protectors and custodians of cultural values as the guarantors of their people's survival. And then also I will also will be use the term of the indigenous people based on the United Nations organization and other special I don't know, special reporter, right? Regarding the indigenous people are the holder of the unique language, knowledge system, and belief, and possess invaluable knowledge of practice for the sustainable management of natural resources. They have a special relation to and use their traditional land. So I will also will be I will also will go further to the concept of land ownership. As you can see in many reference, land ownership, the land is important part of the life and remain essential for social and justice. A lack of security of land tenure means a lack of security in the future of economy. There are 3 ways to ownership. For instance, over and done with dealings, and then inheritance, and by acquiring it through alienation from the authority, meaning from the states, for instance. Accordingly, indigenous people also have the rights to be landowner by disposal through land alienation. And then also I will look the concept of the culture of violence you know, from the CEDAW and then CEDAW recommendations committee. But I will highlight about the culture of violence. Indigenous women face disproportionately level of violence and harassment due to the past and present colonialization of their territories, and because they are indigenous women. They are often subjected to harassment, violence, and even killing by representative of the state, opposition, and criminal group. Moreover, their own communities are not always safe for them with patriarchal culture, and also are exposed to domestic violence and attack on their physical integrity and autonomy. However, indigenous women shall not only be portrayed as victims. They are active change agents and important leaders in the struggle for the rights of their people. From the IWGIA in 2022. So this is my approach, intercultural approach that I will use later. I will use during my dialogue, during my in-depth, you know, with communicate with the indigenous people. I will do like this. The second one is looking for headlights together. This is their pattern. This their tradition. Yeah, what women here, they're looking for headlights together while having small talk. This one, like in the hair, like a lies together. This they do that. You know, once a month, for instance, they do what they're talking during their spare time. This women to women, yeah, and also the girls. And then I will do approach to take part in the fishing anchor pulling activity carried out every afternoon by indigenous fisher women. So this sorry. Okay. So when they return from the sea, so the women usually they collect together and they take part in fishing anchor pulling activity. So I will do approach like this, yeah, during my research to indigenous sea women. And then I also take part in several traditional sea tribe procession. For example, joining a marriage proposal group, because there are so many marriage, yeah, marriage happens in the indigenous sea women. So they the picture. So I will also go with them like sailing, yeah? Sailing with them, take part in their traditional sea tribes. And then also, as I mentioned in the previous days, weeks ago, I also do this by drinking coconut water. I provide drinking coconut water because they love coconuts, yeah. Drinking coconut water with many because they consider this coconut with full of health benefit. On the beach, of course, with Indigenous women while creating a storytelling space. I think it's very useful if I this intercultural, I don't know, activities approach that I will do for the Indigenous sea women. I think that's all of my presentation. I would like to say thank you for all of your uh, attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nukila. No sé, Mayora,
I'm not sure, Mayora, do you want to stop there? I thought maybe it's a lot 3, tab 3. If it's possible, yes. If we can stop here. First, we're going to thank Daisy and Nukila for the interesting and important research, because it's linked to rights that are very specific for women, that determine, that define their self-determination. In the case of Daisy, it's fundamental, and I think it's a study that centers, or you have centered your research in the challenges that women face to have the right to education of the community. And she was talking to us about the importance that education has to generate equality and promote what she denominates as sustainable development, and that can be used to strengthen the life of Indigenous women, so that they can determine. She determines that education is a very important factor for the development of women, and that's where her research is sustained. I think it's important, and she states that the studies have been done, but not for Indigenous women specifically. And the difference that I can see from other studies that have been done is that it's going to be done from the voice and the feeling thinking of Indigenous women. And when Daisy says, I'm going to dress like them, I will be there, it's because she's a part of that community. That's the main difference of the study. It's not done by somebody from the outside. It's done by someone from the communities that knows the stories, that lives, that speaks the language, and that knows the dressing, and that gives it a very particular strength. In her objective, she's going to center in the cultural and economic barriers. And here I would like to make some suggestions in the objectives. Your research is education. It's not dispersed, it's pretty centered. I would like to say, or I would suggest that you broach the cultural barriers in one objective. That's where you analyze the cultural and economic barriers that women face. In my opinion, or my suggestion is that you center in one objective to identify those barriers, the financial, environmental barriers, generational, because that's another element, and how you can make the analysis on how education can be more accessible for non-Indigenous women who live in the area, that for Indigenous women, and how those cultural obstacles weigh in. That would be an element that I would suggest. And another element that I would suggest is to group the impacts. Analyze the impacts in the life of women. So I would stay with one objective where I analyze the impacts for the lack of access or for education of Indigenous women, and that's where I would try to kind of weave. And I do see that our research not only have to highlight problems, violence to different specific rights. In this case, the right to education. They also have to discuss the ability of resilience for women and families. In this case, I would add what strategies have been complemented and that have complemented the POCOP from women's perspective to guarantee the right to education, and how education not only it talks about scholar education or formal education, but also the education that is received at home. That would be an element. And I would also like that, I don't know what part, but maybe within the strategies, add the sense and importance of education for Pokot women. What is education? What does it mean for them? What sense does it make for their life? And what mechanisms, education mechanisms of the people and the Pokot community exist on education? Because, for example, I think of our people, my peoples here in the Mayan region. Some say the education of school, but the other is all the education, all the values, the principles, the weaving practices, all of that, which is part of the education for life, and how it has sustained people. Sometimes when we say women are guardians of culture, yes, because they have been the ones that have received education of those principles and values. I would say that within these strategies of resilience, we have to add the sense of education and the practices of education from women's perspectives, and the proposal of action that I didn't see. What was going to be the proposal or the call to action, which is where we have to make an emphasis. That would be my observations based on content and objectives. Based on methodology, I thought it was a beautiful methodology of living with the community, being close to them. And to me, it's key that Daisy is part of the community, that you speak the language, that knows the story and the life of the community. So it won't be hard for her to make an investment because she's part of the community. And that opens a door. And so I find that that the possibility is important, that you can write from your own language. Some important elements can be written from the language because you speak it. And that would give a lot of, that's going to enrich your research process. And you can see where their own epistemology exists, but not what the books say, but what do you say as an Indigenous researcher? What do Indigenous women say in regards to education, to barriers, to resilience, to everything that education implies in the culture and in the generational and in the economy, generationally speaking? That would be my main observation. I do think their study is very precise, but barriers and obstacles, but we have to understand the strength and the ability of resilience of women and to visibilize their action proposal. So Daisy, I love your research. I encourage you because I think you're going in the right way, in the right road. Justification is very clear. Maybe we were not presented who you're going to consult, who's going to be the heart of your research, or maybe because I was taking notes, I didn't hear that. And I understand that we're going to have 3 communities. And if you can identify because of time that you could do it in the 3 communities, that would be wonderful. And the idea is to gather the cosmo feeling of as many women as possible. But it's important that your study reflects that historical fight women have had for education and what moments of what has happened for women to have better access to education, if that's the case now. and what actions have women had or have women taken to in the communities to improve their access to education. I love your research. I encourage you to do it. I think we need to have that. What education, we have to have that information. What does education, academic and non-academic, mean to us? Because it is a tool that it serves to empower women, especially to empower them of themselves and of their knowledge and their strength. Because we say in my people, sometimes academic education has taken away our empowerment of our strength and our knowledge. It has uprooted us because when we talk about, for example, Spanish, it has taken away our originary language and has imposed Spanish, which is how formal education is in Guatemala. So it takes away, the education takes away that strength and that knowledge. So how can you make that combination and not and establish that even though you don't have access to formal education, you do have your own education, and even question the education, the traditional education of the peoples that is patriarch. But what of that is not patriarchal? And education is a strength, as a tool to strengthen identity and power, genuine power of women, but not just formal education, but also education in a broader sense. That's what I would say. And thank you, Daisy, to encourage you. Thank you with all your strength and wisdom that you can do this work, that you can generate this alliance to get to the community not as a stranger, but as part of a person who's there to weave. So thank you, Angela, for your work that you've been doing with Daisy. I don't know if Daisy, you have a reaction or a question in regards to this.
Yes, I do. I appreciate. Thank you so much for the corrections and for the insights. I will do as you said, and I really appreciate what Teacher Angela has also been doing to us, guiding us and all that. So thank you very much. I'll do the corrections and I'll send them to you. I have nothing more to say. Thank you. I appreciate.
Gracias, Daisy. En el caso de Nuquila, pues también está abordando un tema importante.
Thank you, Daisy. And in the case of Nuquila, she's also broaching a very important topic. And when we try to do this analysis, it's difficult to talk about the situation of land, especially indigenous communities that have been disposed of their land. And within that, women are the ones who live the main consequences, and Nuquila presents it very well. And I know you're being precise. You center in the access of women to land and how this is based on two elements: structural violence and patriarchy. That is the root. It's not that it's culturally responsible. Indigenous communities are responsible for not inheriting. No, there's a historical patriarchal structure that has invaded originary peoples. And in this case, it creates an impact in the life of women. I feel that's very important because it doesn't reduce it. I've heard other studies that say, oh, it's the patriarchal indigenous communities that don't let women have land. No, there is a patriarchal culture and a structural violence that generates that situation. And that, to begin with, gives you an idea of how you're going to arrive. You're not going to question cultural patterns only. You're going to make that historical analysis of why indigenous communities and why women don't have land in those communities, and how socially and politically women are placed in a situation of disadvantage when they can't even decide on their bodies and their reproductive rights and sexual rights. So the fact of rights for property and education is very important. I want to cite that on your based on your study. I understand that you're going to do it or I wasn't very clear as to where you're going to do it based on nomad people that live in the ocean and also on land. But I don't know if it's one community. Maybe it wasn't clear for me, but we could probably clear that up. I think it's very important when you say that they have their own particular religion, and there is a richness there. Because I feel in your objectives, because as I was saying to Daisy, I feel like we have to rescue in your objectives because you establish the factors that contribute to marginalized women in regards to land ownership. And it would be very interesting if you can kind of broach that analysis of patriarchy that has invaded indigenous communities, so that we don't say, oh, it's the indigenous men. No, they're also impoverished. And how are they going to inherit? And how are they going to inherit to women even? Another element is that you speak on violence and discrimination and how it impacts access to land ownership, and how that generates violence and discrimination. And you also want to identify the priorities of women, their needs in regards to a life free of violence, a life that is inclusive in decision-making process, and you want to revise the legal framework. Those are your objectives. But maybe we could group the factors, add to those factors, so we don't have that many objectives, include their violence and marginalization and discrimination within these factors. The priorities are perfect. And there you could maybe even add, what does it mean for indigenous women? What does land mean for indigenous women? What sense does it have? Is it only just private property? To have control over an element as cultural, as capitalism says, just a resource? No. Land allows us to reproduce. It's sacred. It's life. It allows me to recover the right to express in my language, to recover my health practices and my traditional knowledge, and the valuable relationship what does imply for nomad women that spend some time in the sea and sometimes on land. What is the ocean to them? Maybe it means that it might seem like there's no sense because ocean is not subject to property, but it is though. And so I feel like we're missing that part from women's perspective, based on what does land mean to them? What does a life free of violence mean to them? Because one of the impacts of not having land ownership is to deal with violence. A lot of women say, why don't you denounce that? Just because I have nowhere to take my children, because my husband's the one who keeps my children safe in a home, because I don't have a right to own a home. So that's important too, to broach that. So what does land mean to them? Is it what legal framework says, or is it what the United Nations says? What sense does land or sacred value of land is to women? What is to live with violence and without violence for women? So that we could show that in your study. Another element is, what have women done maybe 40 years ago? Zero land. Some might have access now. Even if there's very few cases, what helped these women to have the right to land, to own land? because that's kind of the seed that's going to help you for the proposal and to say, yes, changes can happen. That would be another element that I would like to add. The resilience, resistance, actions that women have done. Are there organizations that are specific or that happen in their own town? And somebody would say, well, we don't inherit land, because if this person marries someone from another territory, they're going to sell their land. And everything that you're talking about, extractivism, it's very easy for somebody to just sell. So analyze those factors as well, but not to justify that women don't have land, but to contextualize why this is happening. That's what I would say that would be missing from your study. You cited various categories, marginalization. I love that. What is to be a woman? What is to be an Indigenous woman? What is property? And what is the lack of safety, of land safety, the violence culture? But I would, because I know that implies more time, I would also kind of say, what is land? What is collective property or family property? What is to be an Indigenous woman, but from their context? Because a lot of them have written, many people have written about us, but I would love it if Nuquila study could have our own epistemology. And you have the tools, Nuquila, you have the tools of yourself as an Indigenous woman. And when you get close, when you talk about your methodology, is to get rid of yourself, because I know that you don't live in that territory, but it's going to work in their dynamic and in their lifestyle, from drinking their coconut water, but it's a practice, it's a fundamental practice of them, and how drinking coconut water tells us a child, a grandmother, a young woman, also how to, when you go into the boat ceremony, the boat wedding ceremony, all that's fundamental. Your methodology is creative in the sense that you're going to be a part of them, and they're going to be a part of you, of those processes. But when you say to rescue values and wisdom, what I see is that in your objectives, we can't see what wisdom and what knowledge you're going to recover. So that's what I suggest. Because I understand that you have a methodology to recover objectives, but in your objectives, we can't see what you're going to retrieve or recover, because it's not just a problem. We don't want to only have studies that face problems, but also strength and wisdom and resilience, but that they do denounce. So when you speak about land marginalization, you are denouncing a very important fact that has nothing to do with patriarchy of the Indigenous people, but the patriarchy as a structural situation and the violence of taking land away from people and impacts them. The access to land is not just for women, it's for Indigenous communities, but it hits Indigenous women more. So that would be my proposal. All the categories from your perspective as an Indigenous woman and from the perspective of Indigenous women. That doesn't mean that you're not going to take on elements, maybe in your protocol. You do define from what the UN says, but from your study, when we read your study, we want to know what violence means from the perspective of Indigenous women. What is land? What is to be from the ocean? What is the sense of being marginalized, and how it fits into the process? What does land mean, and what does it represent in all the different aspects of my life as a woman, as a family, as a people? I hope that gives you more focus on your study. Without, of course, I feel like your research is very centered, and it's very important to highlight that. It's going to be a very enriching study. Because everything is being done from our epistemology as Indigenous women. That's what's going to make it different to other studies, similar studies. So thank you so much, Nukila. I don't know if anybody else wants to provide an opinion or suggest. And then I leave Angela to present another of your sisters.
Does anybody want to share? If not, I invite you to open your camera so that your sisters feel listen, heard, seen. Welcome. If anybody wants to add a comment, we can continue, Angela. Again, you're on the opportunities to take the opportunities to get the feedback that I give you.
Muchas gracias, Mayura.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. That amazing feedback. I can feel your path, your experience, and going from the theoretical model to see it into the practice. And I had to put the modules into practice is really important. Thank you very much for that. All right. Now,
Presentations. We will begin with Doman, and after we have the presentation of Ananya. Welcome, Doman and Ananya. Doman, should you begin, please?
Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. I'll just share. Mm, yeah. Okay. Mm, yeah. Yeah. Is the screen good?
Sí se ve, se ve.
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Okay.
we're good.
Yeah. Ag-agong di kababaihan is actually ag-agong is actually I'm using the local term for purposive conversations among the women. And I'm also using the local term for patpatayan. It means sacred tree grove. We have that. It's actually a ceremonial space or a ritual space. Ironically, it's only men who do the rituals in the patpatayan, but they go there to pray for fertility and productivity. So I'd like to uh, activate discussion on why it's only men, but what's the role of women in nurturing spaces or in bringing about fertility? More on a political. Wait, what? How's that? Yeah, more on a political aspect. So, my topic is actually challenges and potentials of Indigenous women leaders in exercising the right to effective participation in political and public life, as seen in local government and community levels in one ancestral domain. Sagada has 6 ancestral domains, but I'm focusing on the central domain. That's also where the local government seat is, as well as the Anglican mission, which was um, center for, it was actually one of the most outstanding achievements of the American colonial government in its early colonial period in the Philippines. So my area would be in Sagada, that's northern part of the Philippines. It's a landlocked area. This area is the whole region is actually mostly ancestral domains of indigenous peoples, as it was spared from the 300 years of colonial rule of the Spaniards. But the American colonizers successfully penetrated the area. sometime in 1900s to 1946. So justification for the research, well, gender-based violence is growing, and unfortunately it has been silenced, or there's so much silence with about gender-based violence, but it's growing and it's becoming more evident, and children are getting affected. In fact, I've been very involved in a 12-year-old who was killed by a man who was alcoholic, and then there's also a 12-year-old rape. But customary practices are no longer adequate to address this. Unfortunately, the legal mechanisms for protection and justice are also weak. There seems to be some con yeah, I think there's some there has to be some study on how the legal and customary mechanisms should have a dialogue to effectively address gender-based violence. Our town is also affected by armed conflict, but it was one of the first towns that community initiated, that was able to assert the town as a peace zone from community initiatives. So although that happened in 1990s, so that was 30 years ago, it hasn't been the role of women has not really been articulated in raising the voice of peace, although they have played a significant role in asserting the town as a peace zone, and asking both conflicting parties to demilitarize the town. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened just recently. So, but yes, it has so far it has maintained the center of the town to be conflict free, or free from clashes at least. There's also increasing land degradation because of chemical farming, and of course climate change emergencies. We've had a dry spell, long dry spell. It's good that it just rained last week. So this has impacts on women in more ways than one. Unfortunate, our town has very strong cultural heritage. Yes, it has the rituals, it has the ceremonial landscape. Unfortunately, the intangible parts, the values are that have been regulating the behaviors for that has been strengthening community unity, and community collaboration for peace and healing, for more democratic governance, is weakening. So local political leaders are failing to uphold higher standards already of leadership. Before the Council of Elders, or we have indigenous socio-political structures and cultural norms that somehow balanced the indigenous peoples entering into the mainstream local government mechanisms. As I said, it's weakening the values and the standards of the high morality and ethics are disintegrating, unfortunately. So there's a lot of corruption also. And also in the selection criteria for leaders, it's more money now speaking than the quality of leadership that is uh, being looked into. So equality and equity is far from being attained, as the community is not spared from the general situation of women in the country as well, which is dominantly patriarchal and reinforced by colonial legacies and institutions. although we are often proud to say we were spared from the 300 years of Spanish colonization, uh, still, I think we have to look into the influence of the American colonial government. Because in the beginning, I think the mission was to make American way of life be the mainstream. No? So there was also stigmatization and basically wanted to kill the spirit of the indigenous peoples. So there was also dormitories. But I think because the Americans came at the time when the struggles for civil liberties was gaining foothold also in the US. So I think they adjusted somehow. But there are also some studies saying that it was the indigenous peoples who it was the missionaries who were assimilated by the community. So there is also strength by the community to assert the uh the the indigenous socio-political and cultural norms somehow. So until today, it hasn't totally vanished. Although, as I said, it's weakening so much. Women remain in minority in elective political positions, and their roles are mostly limited to domestic and administrative affairs still. Of the 9 elective positions in the town council, only one slot has been occupied by a woman since they've started getting into the electoral platform. I think it's only 3 since women got elected in the town council. So we have 1 now. We're trying to campaign for at least 2 because otherwise the voice of one woman could be dominated by all the men. One woman dared to run for chief executive, but apparently the cultural norm is men being the chief executives. In village level, one woman was elected as barangay captain. That's uh that's a at least it broke the ceiling of all men. A few are joining the village council in the village level. But there are still villages that get only men elected and no woman is running even for the village level. Indigenous women in our community, in the Kankanai community, continue to be vocal and assertive, yes, in family and community affairs. Earlier, they could exert significant influence in the consensus decisions that are made within the indigenous socio-political structure, although it's men who speak. But there are agagong or small conversations where women's voice and women's views can be incorporated. But in public, it's the men who eventually speak up. So we would like to yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, yes, women still rise up in critical times when the threshold maybe has been reached. Uh, but more often, they're silent on public and political affairs because, as I said, the practice has been the men who speak up. So, well, yes, the men would incorporate the women's voice, but I think still important that it's the women's perspective and the women's feelings and articulation that should also be highlighted. So the the study will facilitate remembering and capacitating as well as recognizing indigenous women's right to effective participation. It's beautiful that we have the right, we have this right already. So it and then that women have been strong, yes, but then their voice have weakened. So it's the research process will also help remember and appreciate this strength actually, and then hopefully to increase engagement in transformative, restorative, and regenerative life-giving systems that are compassionate, nurturing, healing, harmonizing, and balancing as it confronts patriarchy, coloniality, and consumerism that's beginning to take over our ancestral domain. Participants would be 15 to 23 participants, 20 to 80 years old. 20, this will include one leader, one female leader of the youth council. So the participants would be those who have been elected or appointed, or holding appointed positions. It's not very many. I've identified 8, I think, here. And then women who are performing leadership roles within the community, not only elective, but the women who are leading in food production, especially in organic and regenerative agriculture to restore degraded lands, women who are into health and healing, traditional as well as contemporary education. We have indigenous education teachers, and also culture bearers, uh, artists who are using or who are utilizing cultural arts to transform rituals, and ceremony leaders, spiritual leaders, and also peace builders. Also, those who are engaged in policy formulation. So the period covered will be 1946 to present. This is actually the period from the since the independence from American colonial colonization, but still we still have a lot of colonial influences. The general objective is to examine the challenges and potentials to Indigenous women's effective participation in local development programming, community healing, and peace building processes. Effective participation, because while there are women in some bodies, we would like to really look into the effectivity of the participation. How much impact do they are they able to create in local programming? Even in peace building, it's still men, mostly men. So it's very much in the context of war and armed conflict. But beyond that, uh, I think women have been playing roles in diffusing tension, uh, creating spaces for dialogue, and even just silent support for uh, uh, silent voice but strong presence in clamoring for peace. So that's the general objective. The specific objectives: one is to examine local practices in the exercise of the right to effective participation. So we can draw this up by asking, by maybe exploring the local indicators. How do the women themselves consider what for them is effective participation in political and public life? And we'd also look at how Indigenous women leaders are contributing to healing and peace building. And so that's more of yeah, that's like looking at I think we will use body we will try to use body mapping here. Oh, no, not yet here. I think the other one. Wait, yeah. I go to specific objectives first. So the second specific objective is to identify the barriers to Indigenous women's effective participation. So here we will articulate the challenges uh, that women encounter. Yes, it might look into the historical context, the economic, social, the cultural context. What else? Yeah. So it has to look into a more holistic dimensions. And I have three specific objectives. The third one is to clarify the strategies that advance the potentials of Indigenous women leaders in local development programming, healing, and peace building. I trust that they've been there are already some actions being undertaken. So we would like to highlight that and build on that. So that's where we will also do ancestral remembering, like the exercise we did earlier, like try to remember women who did significant impact or had significant contribution as leaders in the community. So so the questions include, what are the sources of strengths and inspiration? This includes role models among the ancestors, the values, uh, yeah, mm, and what are the approaches and strategies that are employed. So many times, women are doing it actually, but they're not conscious and they're not confident to name it as strategies. So we'd like to the research could help articulate that and highlight that, to bring it out, to amplify it. And also, how could Indigenous women participation and representation be increased and made more effective in local development programming? So these are the three questions. So I have three chapters as well. First chapter is to kind of an evaluation or look into the levels of participation in political and public life. The second one is look at the challenges, the barriers to effective participation. And the third one is to look at strategies and inspirations to and how to advance effective engagement. So the method the approach is qualitative, indigenous, and intercultural research. I've been studying that, but I'd also like to I've also learned that intercultural, especially indigenous research, is could also be a ceremony itself. The research itself is a ceremony. So we remember, we recall, we reclaim, we reunite, we regenerate our bodies as local researchers and research facilitators and participants to articulate and document Indigenous women perspectives, cosmovision, challenges, potentialities, and plans. I hope I've been listening enough. We do this research engaging the whole being of the participants, me included. So we engage the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions in deep listening, co-dreaming, co-creating, and co-celebrating transformative actions toward increased women participation and representation in local political and public life, healing, and peace building. It will be mindful of principles such as respect, relational accountability, reciprocity. Also, the process would be consultative, participatory, collaborative, constructive, and creative. So, the techniques, uh, the primary technique is agagong, as I said, it's purposive conversations, interviews, more ended interviews, focus groups, storytelling, using the local language, kankanay at all times. And then it will be complemented with playing the flute, bamboo flute, and other instruments uh, to the bamboo flute music, as I've been teaching, I observed it helps a lot in calming the mind and like connecting the mind and the heart, so that the remembering gets easier, and they get to remember also uh the land. It also connects with the land and stories of the ancestors. So it's easier to remember the stories, the experiences with our elders, and the landscape before getting more urbanized. And some body movements, um yeah, body mapping. I would like to study body mapping, especially in identifying the barriers and challenges in political participation. The same time, we'll also have the workshop on preparation of heritage food, since we will share food anyway. We will this entails weaving of leaves. So it's experiential at the same time. Again, brings back memories, and many of the women still remember a lot, especially the 70, 80, and even 60 years old. I even witnessed my grandparents do the rice wine, and these are ceremonial food, so it helps. And then the food are these are heritage rice varieties, so it brings back the value of heritage, the quality of food, that also affects the quality of thinking and the quality of decision making. So we can use that in in uh yeah, we will be discussing political matters, but actually very much embodied. So it will also involve the gut, and then the memories. Yeah. And also we will go to the sacred tree grove itself. So as I said, it's mostly men who do the rituals, but we're not going there to do the ritual, but at least to actually feel it, and be closer to the sacred tree, and then we can share insights as we walk there, and then also appreciating the ceremonial and sacred landscapes. Most of the ritual leaders are men, because most of the ceremonies were actually derived from warfare, and uh, and then I think that became more dominant. It's for the protection of women, so the women did not actually participate in most of the rituals. And then we'll also do mural making using mandala to express the vision of women, in especially in governance, and also transform it into action plans. Like even after the research, we have a guide to follow up in yeah. And then we'll have a celebration, a community level celebration. We'll drink the wine that we will prepare. The rice wine that we will prepare will come in our attires. And yes, we'll be documenting through audio. So this is the chronogram of activities. I will be following the prescribed procedure for pre-prior informed consent with the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples. The process is sometimes very long and tedious and additional expense, but it's also a way of making the system work, because it's not only indigenous peoples researching in our communities, so that when non-indigenous peoples or other researchers will come, we can say, this is our only protection, and we've been researched for so long, so it's not a perfect system, but we still can use it to protect the community and our knowledge. So there will also be a community consultation to present the design. And then individual interviews. Oh, I hope I could start this end of April until June. I'll be interviewing 8 uh, people. And then the focus group discussions. where I will be integrating the body mapping, food workshop, but actually exploring the questions that I mentioned earlier. And then the feedback session is very important also, and the celebration that we have completed the research. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is more for the free prior informed consent. As I said, there will be a informal consultation and meetings with the concern and key leaders, but at the same time, we'll go through the formal process. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Domani. I am so happy to hear you and to see you. You are an incredible researcher. Sometimes we have a lot of trouble with your internet, but it's so nice. And now he's working.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, now we have the presentation from Ananya. Welcome, Ananya. Go on.
Sorry.
Thank you. Can you see my screen presentation?
Sí, sí la vemos.
Yes, we are able to see it.
Thank you. Good evening or good morning to all of my sisters. My research topic is prevention and protection of gender-based violence against Indigenous women and girls in Bangladesh. And my agenda is introduction, justification, general objective, specific objective, methodology, timeline, and reference. Introduction. Bangladesh is a diverse ethnic country. There are more than 50 indigenous communities are live in Bangladesh. They are speaking in 39 languages, according to Bangladesh government. Even the 50 indigenous community and 38 are living in plainland indigenous. And others are live in CST, we call it CST Chattogram Hill Tracts. And Bangladesh indigenous peoples are representing 1% of all populations of Bangladesh. And indigenous peoples are live in especially in indigenous women are the violence from different type of violence, and they are raped, assault physically. They are sometimes violence because of the land rights, and sometimes they are not safe in their community. So all those things happens with Bangladesh indigenous women and also the girls, Bangladesh indigenous women have no specific act for indigenous protections, especially for indigenous women. Even there is no budget, there is no act to protect indigenous women. Justification. But this prevention and protection among indigenous girls, violence against indigenous girls and women are very important to understand what is the situation of indigenous women live in Bangladesh, and especially for plainland indigenous community, because they are live in separately and they are face different type of violence because of their linguistic challenges. Even they are the climate change also they face they face violence because of climate change also. And I will give you the one example of the situation in Bangladesh. There is a girl who's Hajung indigenous community. She was gang raped in 2021 in 25 September. She after the incident, she went to the police station, and the policeman was asked her about the situation. She cannot describe her situation due to language barrier. Even the police asked her what happened with her. She can't express what happened with her. And after the incident, she filed a case to attempt to rape. Actually, she was gang raped. And I will give you another example. In 2015, a Garo indigenous woman who was gang raped in microbus. So in the 2015 until 2024, she didn't get any legal action and any justice for her. So the study is not only for recognize the system, but also the study is also focused on the community, because indigenous women sometimes face violence in their own community. They are not safe in their own community because of their some rituals and the stigma which are violated indigenous women. And also indigenous women face different type of violence from other side, and also their own community. And the study will and the study findings also help to the community to understand women and their situations. And also it helps to the community and the others people to understand the indigenous women's need and their challenges, because they are live in remote area. Sometimes they cannot get access to education, legal health, and also some linguistics barriers. They cannot access any government help. So all those things happen with indigenous women. So my research question is, what are the specific form of gender-based violence experienced by indigenous women girl in Bangladesh? How do factors like social status, ethnic identity, and gender contribute to the vulnerability to violence? What are the root cause and underlying social, cultural, political, and economical factor that precede this violence? What are the immediate and the long-term consequences of gender-based violence on the physical, mental, and social well-being of indigenous women and girls? What are the existing interventions and support mechanisms in place, and how effective are they in addressing this issue? So these are my research questions. My general objective is to comprehensively addressing and mitigate the previous issue of gender-based violence against indigenous women and girls in Bangladesh. Specific objective: to conduct a thorough analysis of document cases. Especially, we will try to reach this women who are experienced in their life violence, and we will conduct 3 types of questions. One question is for who experience violence. One question for those who work for indigenous women, like organizations, women activists, and others people. And third question we will conduct with lawyer who helps indigenous women to to get justice. So 3 questions we will contact with them, and then we will find the situation of indigenous women and their pattern of violence. We will analyze social and political culture also, how the political culture affect indigenous women and push them about vulnerability. And also the gender-based violence includes social, ethnic identity, and gender-based discrimination. How indigenous women are faced discriminated by their identity and also the social status. To evaluate the immediate and long-term physical, mental, and social consequences of gender-based violence and well-being of indigenous women and girls, including their access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunity. And we will also try to find out the situation of indigenous women who experience their life in violence and how they are healing themselves in mentally after the incident. Even we will go to our older generations like our grandma, our mom, and great grandma, how they are faced in their time in this violence and how we are faced. We will compare the situations like is the situation is getting better or worse. We will try to understand our grandma sometimes how they are healing themselves from when they face discriminations and violence. We will try to find out the way they are mentally healing process. Like in our community, we have a mental healing process, like we call it Azia. When the women are face victim or they are happen incident with them, and we are sing together. It's not like a song, but we will sing together, or we will spend together at night and looking at the sky. So we will try to find all those things after the findings. After the research findings, we will talk with our youth generations what they are thinking about women, and also the stakeholders and NGO and advocacy group who are working for indigenous women's violence and promote awareness in our community. Because if we are protect our girls first, we need to change our own community, then we will go with others. Even if we will work together to understand what is the situation of land indigenous community, because they are disappearing day by day. I will give you one example. There is Rangmichek community who are only 6 members are still living in Bangladesh, and they all are old. Even Banai community and others community are disappearing because of land evicting land. Evicting land also the part of women's violence. Sometimes they are target women for the land. And methodology. I will use mixed method approach, like I will quantitative and qualitative, and also the intercultural research method. The case study method survey, we will conduct a survey and questions developed after the sampling come. Then we will design for the community and data collections. We will conduct interviews and survivors, and also we will discuss focus group of discussion. Because in focus group discussion, we will divide it 3 groups, like youth groups and also women and men groups. three groups we will discuss in focus group discussion. Even we will try to reach teacher and also lawyer and others, youth leader and also community leaders. And storytelling, we will use community-based participatory research, where we will use method storytelling and participatory mapping, oral history. Sometimes women are not try to talk about their situation, and then we will use indigenous art or craft, or she can write a letter for us. Visual and art-based approach, we will use video, because when we will visually like video in, if anyone wants to talk about their incidents or organization or women activists who wants to talk about the incidents, how she will deal with these situations, and we can video or document it as a documentary. And ethical considerations, obtain information, we will respect every indigenous community norms and their ritual. We will definitely seek permissions to do, if they are agree, then we will conduct the research, because we respect every individual. Timeline, team meeting, we already do one meeting with our team, and after Eid al-Fitr, we will do another meeting. And research question development, we already one questions we develop, and two questions are already in working. Women who face experience is violence, we already done this questions, and another two question is working on. One is for a lawyer who help indigenous women to get justice, and another question is we are developing is who NGO and women activists who work for indigenous women, and workshop for the volunteers who will conduct the research data collections. We have a workshop for this in May. After that, in May, we will collect data, and data analysis will be May and June, and FZD, we will do it in June. In-depth interview, we will in-depth interview with our grandmoms and our mother and the women activists who work for indigenous women, and the youth leader and indigenous community leader. And after the research finding, we will talk with these findings with the community leaders and the community youth, because if we want to change, youth generation are the faster, so they can create awareness easily. So we are targeting research finding, first of all, young generations, and we will really share with this research finding with the community leader and also the men. And after that, we will submit all the project. Reference. There is no research about indigenous women's violence against indigenous women in planned land, so it is difficult for me to find. But I will try to collect the newspaper cutting, which helps me. And the Ishani Chakraborty, she is a professor of Dhaka University, and she conduct a research about indigenous women the research is on she conduct the research in Chittagong Hill Tracts, Bangladesh, but there is some point about plain land, so I will use it, and IGA. Thank you.
Thank you, Anania, and for your project and your ideas. Thank you very much. Now we have the last presentation of this section. Vivian, welcome.
Perdón, podría, solicitaría tal vez hacer el comentario de las...
I would like to make the feedback for these two presentations prior to the presentation, please.
Mayora le iba a proponer si hacíamos las tres, porque es que imagínense que ya son 8. Entonces, le iba a proponer si
I want to propose if we can have Vivian.
yo igual creo que no vamos a alcanzar.
I think we won't be able to get everything today because there's so many projects and ideas that we can get
Se me ocurre una idea.
that each one, but I'm feeling, if you're all agreeing, that you can present.
Seguir con
Okay.
Que presentes pues Vivian y si logramos de pronto Mimi
And we have limit.
y el viernes en la
And then on Friday, the first session
estaría
would be leaving for
Fátima y Nay
Fatima and I.
y yo condensaría la docencia.
And I'll do that part on Friday.
¿Parece? Para que
Will
no
that be okay?
tanto.
So that we don't run that long?
Yo agradecería que así fuera, pero también me gustaría
Yes, but I would like to leave to Nai as well because she raised her hand
para ver cuál era su opinión.
to see what was her opinion. I feel that I want to contribute to this part too that we just had.
Levantó la mano.
But let's go. She raised her hand. Oh,
Angela, I wanted just to know about us, but you already
Quisiera-
answered. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Nay, I was proposing perhaps because it's so
Okay.
interesting to listen carefully your projects and the comments of Lorena. Perhaps we can have now the comments of Lorena. After we can perhaps have the presentation of Vivian, and the next session in Friday we can, in the first section, we can have the presentation of Mimi and yours, if it's okay, because I know it's so stressful now to prepare the presentations, and I don't want to. Yes, it's okay for Mimi and Nai, for example, to present, and Fatima to present the next session, or you want to do the presentation today? Because I think we can have more time to discuss, but it is okay for Mimi, Nai, and Fatima.
Up to you, teacher. I'm okay to do now. I'm okay to do next.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. And now, Fatima.
Yes, no problem. Thank you. Even the next session will be good.
Okay, perfect. Listo, Mayora, entonces la escuchamos.
Muy bien. Muy bien. Bueno,
Okay, so we'll listen to Ms. Lorena's feedback. Doman, congratulate you for your topic that you are finding. That has to do with the political participation of the women, but also the emphasis being made on the importance of, can we do participation study, political participation studies, but you're going to do it in a context of violence, where the violence and the occupation of the territories, where you have seen the institution of violence. So how do you make a political participation, and how do you build a peace culture in territories that already been entered? So this is the part that enriches this study, because it's not only participation in peace, but also in context of violence, and how women, it calls my attention when you said the silent voices that are acting for peace. And I think that it's a the novelty of this topic is very important because I put it in the reality that many of our countries are living in our territories are continue to suffer violence, who are still being looted and invaded by nationals with the capital interest that are trying to take advantage of taking advantage of our lands and get rid of our towns, and how that impacts the life of women. So when you talk about political participation in terms of war, when there's criminality, invasion of territories, it's a big challenge. And I think, Dom, you doing a great part here because you're talking about the value of the women within that balance of context, between that value, the peace building phase. So it's important to understand what is peace. And that's what I want to rescue from it, and how those spaces of participation happen in context where the decision making is concentrated or focused on the man, especially in practice, concrete practices like you mentioned, because I don't know the words that you mentioned, because I don't know the language, but you talk about this is the practices where we are centered the decision and the participation of men. Women are marginalized in those spaces. And from that, I think your study has that novelty and important and necessary. And I think that she does a good relationship of gender violence, the structural violence, climate change, and how that weakens the values of the towns and weakens the parts of participation of women. And she talks about participation of women, but in conditions that are of inequality, of an disadvantage, and that makes the political participation a lot harder. And she talks about the colonization continues. The impact of colonization in those territories and in those ways, our political participation is still there. In terms of your objectives, I feel that she has them very precise. One is to identify the effectiveness and the impact of the political participation in the peace context. To be peace builders, it is very important and very current in our situations. In parts of context of war, when silence voiced by present, claiming for peace. And those are the bodies of women who are being put in this context. It is the voice of those women. They are the ones who are alone after the war, after repression, or after criminality. Those are the voices that are being silent, saying, those are the ones that I want to appear in my study. So they are no longer silenced, but becomes present, visible, and they be listened to. And the objectives, well, one for objective is how do you rescue the exercise of the right of participation, of how women have a right of participation? What are the factors or barriers have you found with further participation? And here, I think it's worth it to, when you talk about the barriers, you talk about historical barriers, economic barriers, social barriers, cultural barriers. And it's important where you can identify since when has this happened. When they're doing the research, has there been participation in the past by women there? How was their participation in the past? What positions could they have? And why can they no longer carry those positions? And just trying to understand, I understand why not in the political spaces, but also in the own spaces of the community where they're not there. What factors have an impact there? Had there never been participation of women? I've seen studies where we have seen in the past we did have participation before the colonization, before war. Women had a important fact, but that disappeared. And with the colonization side, it was marginalized. So what are the possibilities that we can recover that? And another one is that is valuable. Dom is not alone in talking about the issues, but she wants to rescue the strategies of participation of women. the strategies of resilience from the local, and what other spaces are there, and how to act, and how can there just be silenced voices, to be active voices and visible. So she's not lamenting only the issues, but the study is trying to find that participation, and there where you can cite the historical path, the participation of women in the past, what position did they held, what it meant to be an authority in the past, and here he can rescue and create epistemologies of what is to be a woman and what is to be in a political participation for them. What does it mean, war for them or for women? What does it mean to have for indigenous women? What does peace mean to them? What does war mean to them? What does it mean to be a peace builder in context of war and of violence? Done from the voice of women. And I think that's valuable when you say the level of participation of women in the public life and the strategies of participation in public life, in community life. And it's also important and interesting if you can have segments. What are their own ways of organizing in the past ancestrally, and the way that it's done now by the state, by political parties, committees, how in the two ways, the ancestral way, which I think that still has that it must exist still, and nowadays with this system that has been colonized, and how the woman survives within those two contexts from their own strength and their own feelings and thinking. And also, I would also say that it's missing the proposal. So not only the issue, but also an action in the incidence plans. But I did mention at some points. I want to ask you here the own ways of participation of the women in the past and now currently. And then also you talk about the ceremonies. You talk about to remember, to call upon, to invoke, and to heal. So this is very important that you mentioned because this the research is not only going to be a process of recovering data of life of hurtings, but it'll also be a space of healing. When you talk about how do we recover this own ways, and you talk about co-creation, that's another element that was very important to me because you talk about it's not only your process, you're co-creating and awaken processes and call for processes collectively, and that is very important. And you also talk about the epistemologies that you're going to rescue from the study. For example, with the impact of the context of violence and repression, what does that mean for the body, for life, for the energy of those women and the grandmothers and the adults and the elders? What does it mean for them to participate? What does it mean for them to have violence? What does it mean to have a culture of no violence? What is it for them? And how does that impact life? What does healing mean? How do they heal? How are we healed in the past? And we have our own story. And we have found our own ways. And what is it for women to have that spiritual peace? The culture of peace is in one way, as Lorena, or is that the culture of peace for my family, for my town, for my village, so there's flowers to bloom without any pollution, so that the water is clean? But what does it mean when we talk about the culture of peace? Is it the absence of war? Are you talking about the absence of guns, or does it go beyond that? So I feel that your study has a lot. Another element that I want to rescue is well, the methodology recovers and gives voice and ways of women. And that's very positive. And you made an emphasis on that in the methodology. It's not the voice of them. It's the voice and the word and the feeling of the women. And you're going to facilitate to have it generate for them to express themselves. And you did mention, you talked about who you're going to be talking to. I think you mentioned it, I remember right now. But who you're going to be consulting with for these spaces? Are you going to talk about men from my perspective? How they feel threatened when the women talk to them about participation, political participation? Many feel threatened, so they're going to invade their decisions. And when you talk about that there are being practices where women are not involved, why are they not there? If the mother is insisting she's there. From the white thinking, we want to say the women, we want to see the women there. It's not that, although they're not there, they're taking actions. But investigate that part. It will be very enriching. And what feeling does it have for the women to have for those spaces, even if they're not participating? Are they only being used? I feel that that part could be identified better. And that the strength of your research is showing that part, showing the participation of women in the structure as a town, as a women, and the participation of women that came with colonization, and that we're no longer, we don't even know where we are. How this move in the social structures, what gives more life to women? For example, one that has, that she's a healer, wants to read the time, the ones that do the mandalas. Well, that's political, that's participation as well. So how do we rescue that part? So I have a suggestion as well. I love your study as well. I think that it gives it, when you say study, we talk about land, we talk about education, we talk about political participation and violence. So we have a lot at Africa and Asia. We see a lot. We're going to be touching a lot of freedoms that women have and rights that women have, and how these are being violated to the land, to the education, and violence in general. A life free of violence. How do we do this? How do we live it? Because that's a challenge. From our feeling and thinking of women, how do they live it? So this is very important that we are able to sustain this. And we got to remember that whoever made this has to be able to, that doesn't mean that we're disqualifying them. But our study has to rescue all of that strength. And of course, denounce all of it. And that's for Dom. Thank you, Dom. Congratulations. And also, I think they said it will be amazing because it will give you a light for us in Latin America who are also facing this, the looting, and we talk about political participation and build cultural peace in cultural violence is very important. So thank you very much. Ananya, thank you also. Your topic has to do with the prevention and protection. Prevention and protection of women and girls in gender-based violence in Bangladesh. Your objectives, I feel that it's very, you talk about mitigating the writing of it might be something that we talk about. Can we mitigate violence? Or can we just contribute to something that's just to process a bit more the objective, be more concise with the objective, and perhaps to visualize the violence, the types of violence, talk about violence, and the resilience that women have. That could be part of their objective, so that we only see the part of the specific. I feel that to document the cases of violence, and there, how many cases are you going to analyze of the youth women, older women, elder women, and how are you going to talk about these cases? You're going to talk about them individually, or they're already been written, and just going to document what is written about it because of what already is there in the juries, or you're going to be talking to the victims, and what are you going to do? What's the process look like? So how do we don't go to, we do research. How do we do not to move, victimized again? Because it's to awaken the situation for the women and how we accompany them. How do you think you're going to accompany them when you talk about healing? How are you going to accompany that process? And how can we support you here? And also, how can we support you? Because it's a topic that is very complex when you talk about violence. And also talk about what does it imply to you? What does it imply? What are you triggering here? So as researchers, indigenous researchers, we need to learn and we heal together because we're not external. Let's find yourself as a researcher, as a consultant. We're not, our research, intercultural research is to be with them, that we feel that they were there feeling, what their town is feeling, what that village is feeling, that we become a part of it. And together with them, we write this and sustain this. That's one part. And you also talk about identifying patterns that define the gender violence. And there I would suggest that as well, a structural analysis, because you talk about indigenous towns are savages. They're wild. How do we talk about this feeling again? Talk about this violence that reached our territories. How do they have historical values? Just like the Nukila was saying, the no access to land is a part of the past. So also that we give back to it in the part of the chapter to do a structural analysis, and also that you can also do the critical, the part internal part of the in the original town, in the structures from our towns, and access to justice as well. The access to justice of the indigenous women, and also want to ask you or suggest you at the same time, are you going to talk about the access to justice from the state? Or are there ways to talk about justice that apply by the towns? How violence is talked about in the original towns? So I feel that that is very important to talk about this. Where are you going to talk about if I suffer violence? Who do I go to first? Do I go to my parents? Do I go to the grandparents? Do I go to the elders? Do I go to the community leaders? So what's the process looks like? I am a victim of violence. Where do I go to? Because perhaps the jury is too far away to go to a public ministry, to talk to the police. So when we talk to access of justice, what does the pathway look like? And also talk about the economic impact that it has. I want to talk about the proper justice of the town. So we also have to be able to put the characteristics into the justice as well. What does this look like? Is there patriarchy there? Are there values there that I can rescue where women can help them? And because, or the system itself, it will lead me to more violence. And what's the access to justice look like by the state as well? What does that imply for women? And if the state does not help me, because I don't want to make the denounce. You talk about the political part of the women and discrimination. That's another objective. And it's talking about that, and it's a very important one. I think that's important. And it's part of what you're trying to find that context. What is the context of violence against women look like? And now I talk about the community, about the structure itself, and the system itself, and how that system leads us to this violence, and how it impacts the bodies of the women, and also how women face gender violence. And that's something that I think that's very important to highlight, because it's not just women that are victims. You're talking about the surviving women of violence, how they have faced it with their own ways, with their own mechanisms, and that's very valuable. And that is a chapter that has to have a lot of weight in the study, because that's what we want to give forward to in the research. And I think I take value in the methodology when I talk about creative methodologies and creative methodologies. And when you talk about to the process, but I want to ask, how does the study happen? How does case study happen? How many are there? When you talk about the healing as well, you talk about self-help group, where it's 5 groups that are gonna meet them together. We're gonna do collective therapy. We're gonna do incense. We're gonna do it in the field because it can be done collectively, and that's part of the therapy as well. When somebody listens to me that lived the same thing that I did, I know that we're not alone. So how do I live this? So Angela has a big ally there who could guide you. If we can serve you in that sense as well. If it's going to be done individual, more than an interview, make it a sharing moment in the field or in a space that they can breathe. You talk about the music, or somebody else talk about music. All those elements are very important, where they can where she's not being a victim, but a contraire, she's healing, and that's a difference. When you talk about what you feel and what you talked about, and how you dress that way, that's violence. But if I go there where I'm spoken to in a different way, that I'm healing. Where you live in here, well, that's what I leave. That you're not gonna take that with another person again. To be massages, or take waters or herbs, or some types of whatever. I don't know what your herbs you use back over there. But just as a suggestion, right? Of course, you don't have to do it. And also, I didn't see in the proposal what are those epistemologies, the terms, the definitions that you're going to be using. What are you going to be rescuing beyond the theory? But what are women saying? I would add there, what is violence? What is a life free of violence? What is life is only fullness? What is a system of justice for the town? So getting that epistemologies that become a heart of the of the study, and that's part of my suggestion. Where you're going to be talking to, and think I lost something, but I don't think you mentioned there. What communities and the coverage as a whole. I think it's a beautiful study, and it's very important and necessary. And it's not done. It's done from the resilience and surviving and life. So there, I would also suggest the chapters when you talk about that all the studies been done talk about life, and at some moment talk about Anja and Dom. Thank you very much, and I hope that I contributed a bit more than adding to this. I congratulate Angela, the group, for weaving this. It's going to contribute a lot. Thank you. Alvaro, I can see the presentation. I'll try to, if I can get the presentations in English, that's fine. I'll try to perhaps something, I might lose something idea of the translation. And that's why I made some observations, but I did it with my whole heart. Thank you very much.
Gracias, mi queridísima Mayor, por toda esa sabiduría y esa escucha profunda de estos proyectos fantásticos. Bueno,
Well,
in the next part we have the presentation of Vivian. Vivian, I want to ask you, because we have only 30 minutes. It's okay for you if you present something like 15 minutes, and Elder Lorena should do the comments after. It is okay for you?
Yeah, sure. I will be very brief.
No, very no, because you are so incredible. Not very. Because if you want, we can work the next section. Yes, in Friday, or I don't know. What do you prefer?
Okay, I am okay. my presentation, I prepared.
Si quieren, hagamos una, que Vivian nos presente
If you
con...
want, Vivian, you can present all the time you need. I will take notes of the observations, the ones that we can talk about, we will, and if not on Friday, we can talk about it again.
Como todas, ¿verdad?
Okay.
Con el tiempo necesario.
The idea is that we do things with the correct amount of time. So go ahead. Go ahead, Vivian.
Thank you. I want to do away with the participants appearing on my screen. Just a minute.
Ya la vemos.
We can see it, Vivian.
So, my research title is on to assess environmental and socio-economic impacts of a cement industry, which is called CEBIT, on the lives of Pokot South residents in West Pokot County. So these are some of the photos of the cement industry. So the industry was being developed in the indigenous land. And we all know that most of the indigenous land is usually communal, like the case of this area. But because of the establishment of this cement industry, it has resulted into some restrictions and of course denying the residents their rights to utilization of land. And of course, there's noise pollution and other environmental effects. So that's why I chose to undertake this study, because definitely it will impact indigenous women, because of course indigenous women reside in the community. So I don't know, there's something wrong with my screen. I can't see the entire part of it. Let me drag it. Okay, I found it. Yes.
Did you find? I was going to ask. Do you want to share your full screen so that you can see the slide on the whole screen?
Okay, it's okay now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So to justify my research is that Pokot indigenous community that reside in Pokot South constituency face serious socioeconomic and of course environmental challenges. For example, there is limited employment opportunities. There is limited infrastructure development, and of course, one of the major challenges that they face is environmental degradation. So since this cement industry is viewed as economic player in the region, it can either result to minimizing the challenges that the residents face or increase the impact. So to me, my research is important because I will actually get to know the impacts that this cement industry poses to the residents of Pokot South. So my general objective is just like the title of my research, to assess environmental and socioeconomic impacts of the CEBIT cement industry on the Pokot indigenous community in Pokot South, Kenya. So that is a photo of the cement industry. So the questions that I have in my head is, I would actually want to understand the extent to which CEBIT cement engage indigenous women and girls in manual jobs and other job categories. So I will actually want to understand whether indigenous women benefit by having the cement industry in their land. And of course, I will want to understand how the presence of this cement industry impact the indigenous women economically. So I will actually assess the their income patterns to understand whether it's being derived from the cement industry or from elsewhere, so that I can have that comparison to get to understand whether they're benefiting or not. And I also want to understand whether there are environmental impacts of the cement industry in the Pokot South. And of course, another important aspect is I want to understand what are the perception of the indigenous women towards the presence of this cement industry in their land. So my specific objectives is to quantify the number, types, and allocation of employment opportunities, like I said, to quantify the number and types of infrastructure established by the cement industry. In this objective, I want to understand the social amenities that the cement industry has maybe developed. And of course, I will analyze the income generation patterns. I think I mentioned that, and to evaluate environmental impact. So I have 4 specific objectives. My study area, I said it's in Pokot South. So in Pokot South, it's being inhabited by different tribes. So we have the Turkana, we have Pokot, we have the Keyo community, yes. So I did not manage to get the map for my study area, but I promise you that I will get it. If not, I will digitize the map. And then for the methodology, during the preparatory phase, I will definitely review the literature to get to understand the existing work that has been done in the area, in Kenya, and of course in other parts for comparative analysis. And also I will identify the key stakeholders. Right now, what I have in mind is I will involve the representative from the cement industry operating in the region, of course, community leaders, elders, and members, the local government, which will include the county government officials, those environmental impact and assessment experts in the area, and representatives who work at the grassroots, maybe from the NGOs, CBOs, and other civil society organizations. So in data collection sector, of course, I have indicated how I will collect data in each of the objectives. So my data collection methods is characterized by community participation. I will actively engage the community members to get to understand their needs, their priorities, so that my research methods will be culturally sensitive and handle their cases well. I will use the local and knowledge system in this case when I want to quantify the number types of employment. Yes, for example, I will consult the community. We will have oral stories, yes, and participatory mapping. Of course, the language, I'll make sure that it is well understood. Just in case, maybe I will have data collectors team. I'll make sure that they understand the language of the people that we are going to get the information from. And for my second objective, of course, my research methods, I will employ a collaborative mapping. Of course, by moving around to get to see the amenities, whether there are roads, whether there are schools, whether there are other infrastructure that resulted from the availability of the cement. Visual documentation, I will take videos, I will take photographs to reflect or to show what is actually happening in the ground. Storytelling and narratives, I am going to incorporate that in my data collection. For my third objective, I'm going to use participatory survey, where the community will be engaged actively. I'm going to use in-depth interviews where I'm going to interact with them, use the local language, and try to get the information on the income generation patterns, their sources of income, yeah. And to assess the environmental impact, this is where now I will use the quantitative methods. Maybe I will do some water analysis. maybe physical, I will just assess the physical parameters of the water. Of course, I will look at the biodiversity around and try to get information from the elders to know the trend and get to know what has really changed as a result of the cement industry. I will use the traditional ecological knowledge all the time, because of course I'm working with the indigenous peoples and they're the people that understand the landscape. They know what was there and what has changed. All this time I'm engaging the community actively. And then for data analysis and reporting, since my methods, as you've seen, it's going to employ both qualitative and quantitative methods. So when doing the data analysis as well, I'm going to adopt the quantitative data analysis, statistical methods, and of course the qualitative data analysis, where I'll present my findings using pie charts, graphs, and so on. And reporting, I will integrate the findings, I will summarize, I will make sure all the photos is well put in the report, and then I present it to you, to my organization, of course, to my community, if permitted. And for my timeline, so in March, I had concept development where I was having an idea about what I will do. And yes, I presented my topic to Teacher Angela. And in April, we are in April now, yes. So I will wind up on my proposal writing and phase 1 of data collection. In May, I will do the data collection and initiate now the report writing. I will collect the data as I write report. In June, I will analyze my data and continue writing the report. In July, I will finalize the report at the beginning of July, maybe the first week. I will finalize my report and submit. So I have read a lot of documents, which I have cited here. I did not put all of it here because this is a PowerPoint presentation and I knew because of time I had to limit. But when I'll be presenting my proposal, I'll make sure I have referenced all these materials there. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know if Lorena, do you want to do your comments now? We have 15 minutes. It's okay for you?
Sí. Gracias.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank Vivian for your work and your information. It's a very important topic because you are centered concretely in the cement industry, the environmental impact that the cement industry has on that community, in the Bacot community. And I think it's very precise. It's not dispersed, but it's actually very precise. And territorially speaking, it's very concrete. Your justification is clear. You want to see how this has impacted mainly women and the economic impact. I think it's very positive. Just you're talking about positive, probable positive impacts in the economy and the generation of employment. But in the end, we have to realize that this is real. And if we're actually generating new income, if it actually provided any help to the economy. But what's more important, the small amount of income and the impact to environment and women, and how it impacts to pollution and women's lives in their way of being. And along with the general objective, you talk about evaluating. I would suggest that we're not going to do an evaluation because to evaluate is another process. We are going to research. So we have to identify environmental impacts. I would change it because when you evaluate, you make an evaluation. That's not a case study, that's an evaluation. So I don't know what Angela feels like, what she believes, but I feel like the evaluation is one thing and research is something else. So I would prefer that you word it as identifying the impacts. You're going to identify the impacts. What impacts have they had in the industry, or what in the Pocahontas community because of the cement industry in that territory, and maybe make it precise and in women in the community, but also in women and women's lives. Then the specific objectives identify how they benefit, how is it important for the economy, quantify the type of impact. That's one of your objectives, and what they provide, whether financial or any other kind of impact. Another topic is to identify the type of infrastructure. So I would say identify the impact, and then you can say the kind of impact, whether it's financial or economic, or whether it's education, women empowerment, infrastructure, things like that. And within those impacts, the infrastructure, especially when you talk about infrastructure, why do you want to know about these infrastructure impacts, and how does it benefit communities? Then you say analyze the possible general impacts on the generation of income. That was another one of your objectives. Analyze the generation of income. So maybe that would be one objective for me, right? But it's up to you. But that could be centered in one chapter. But we are missing one specific objective. I don't know if maybe I didn't write it down. When you talk about the impact, so on one part, we're talking about the positive impacts, which would be the first part, and then it would be another specific objective when you talk about negative impacts that they have had on the women, the environment, the life of women, the environment, the financial aspect, the income. And then I didn't hear if you talk about how throughout this time, how the community have defended their territory and have taken actions against negative impacts, or has the community been left passive and haven't done anything against it? Or have they done any efforts to avoid another extractivist industry to come into the territory? Have they done activities to have taken action to demand the right salary, the right type of work? And how have women participated in that process? I feel like that wasn't there, but maybe it's implicit, and it would be good to add it, because it's not just to see what they have left it positive or negative, but also what have we done as peoples and women? And of course, your proposal, what's going to happen? How much are they leaving behind financially to the community? Or do they leave it in the municipality, in the local government? What is the financial impact? What they leave there in terms of employment, but also what benefit do they leave with people? And what's more important, the apparent short-term financial impact or the long-term environmental impact? And in one of the chapters, we have to identify, how did the cement industry get there, and what was it before? What was it like before? What was the territory before like, and what was women's life like before they got there? Because then we can talk about a before the cement industry arrived and an after. If your research could present this, would be very useful, and of course that you can present the strength and the wisdom. You talk about rescuing and listening elders and doing collaborative mapping, but to rescue what? You're going to rescue what the sacred value of earth is, the sacred value of water, because when you talk about environmental impacts, you have to talk about what is the sense of water, or how is it important to the indigenous communities, water and flora and fauna because they deplete the environment. They take away, they don't just take the cement, they take other minerals. They don't tell us. They take other minerals, but they were telling me in an African study, but they also took our wisdom because that's where the medicinal plants were there. We no longer have forests, for example, to harvest our medicinal plants. So what impacts, cultural impacts and emotional impacts do we have? I think that is what we're missing. I think it's very important to discuss the financial aspects, but also the environmental impacts or the other impacts. And as a suggestion, ask what was the process of the cement industry arriving there? Was there a previous consultation? Was there a negotiation? This is important to announce it are presented in your study, and also that capability of resilience and resistance and defense of territory. What role do women play? We also have to cite what categories or epistemologies is your study going to leave behind? What is land to women? What is water to women? And what does it mean? What does it mean to women to be free of contamination, of pollution? Because truly, the cement company comes in and they end life. How do you rescue that strength and that wisdom? So I would suggest to create those terms to the epistemology that you're going to write from your perspective as an Indigenous woman, but also from the perspective of the Indigenous woman of Pocot, where you're going to do the study. I think it's wonderful. I am thinking I have to do my thesis too, and I was thinking of doing it in another subject, but there is a cement industry here at an hour away from where I live. When I go to the terrace of my house and I see that the mountain is being depleted, and you are actually awakening my desire to do the research from there as well. I also suggest to strengthen the focus of your methodology from the intercultural methodology methods. I think that we have to present more information on there, but I think that there's an important information that you have to provide, and I know you're going to provide it from your feeling, thinking perspective as a woman, as an Indigenous woman that has a strength and a history just like the other sisters that are in this course. Thank you so much. I think that instead of shortening, I make your studies longer, but I think we have to reinforce. I don't know if we have other comments or other comments. Thank you, Mayora. I think that for today, as they say in my country, for today, we're done. Because I forgot the break.
I was so excited. I am so sorry. Entonces yo creo que por hoy también quería terminar.
So I feel that for today we're done. I also wanted to finish telling you that Tunen is with us here today. I want to congratulate her. She just had a baby.
Estamos muy felices por ti y muy
We are so happy for you, and we are so grateful that you're here with us because she was born 1 week ago, her baby. Congratulations, Dunan. We know what having a baby implies and be in recovery and to be in this research space, but it's a much more harmonious space. And I know that your heart is going to be happy to be here, and welcome to that being of light that also was being formed through this process. And we know she's going to be a researcher too. So welcome. Thank you so much. So big hugs.
Fatima and I enjoy the next section because today, Fatima, I am so sorry, we need to close. Gracias, Mayora Lorena. Una felicidad oírla. Un
Thank you,
abrazo.
Mayor Lorena. It was great to hear you. Big hugs to you all. Take care of yourself. Goodbye. Have a good night, good afternoon.